the white supremacists like to show dominance is by using sexual exploitation. People who are dominated socially can be dominated sexually.
Sex is a way in which you show your domination. It's like a male dog gets on another male dog and humps on him. He's not after the sex, he's showing he dominates. I'm in control.
If you have a system in place to guarantee your very survival, you will use any means at your disposal. So sex then becomes a tool. This whole idea of creating a mulatto caste is designed to create a buffer between the whites and the blacks. You give more privileges to this mulatto caste.
Even Chancellor Williams, in his book, he was claiming that due to a biracial population which came about from Greek mixing with the indigenous African population there, it rose up another army which fought against their African mothers and fathers.
In Africa, when the Europeans came in, the Portuguese would mate with the Africans, and their offspring would be called Lancados. And the Lancados were the offspring of African and Europeans. And what happened was the Lancados, the mixed offspring of the Europeans and the Africans, they became slave traders themselves because, again, a lot of biracial children would take on the ideology of the father. So whenever you see people talk about, well, Africans sold other Africans, this is really who they're talking about.
When the Inquisition came, many of the Jews left Portugal and went to West Africa. This is during the period of the 1400s and 1500s. And they became the people who were running the slave trade. Some were Christians, some were Jews, many were Jews. And what they would do was marry African women, usually from a chieftaincy family or somebody where they can get in good. And they would use the offspring of these marriages to be the middlemen in the slave trade. That went on all over West Africa.
It was the mulattoes who did Haiti as much, if not more harm than the French. Because there's this thing about white supremacy is a very infectious disease. And when you buy into the lie that white or light skin is superior to black or dark skin, then we'll find instances where a mixed race black would be more vicious than a white person because they have to prove to the white person that I'm on your side, I'm okay.
Mulattoes have always been used. The French were good at that, setting it up in Trinidad. They had the different staircases of mulattoes and octoroons, octagons, and different classifications of mulattoes. And they give the mulattoes the power over the darker skinned ones. And then on top of the mulattoes were the white people. It's another way of buffering yourself from the attack. So when black people get angry, they got to go through to beat the mulattoes to get to the white people. So that was actually a buffer zone in the manipulation and controlling the people.
You had a ship full of African men, women, and children who were at the mercy of the captain and all the sailors on that crew. And those men could have sex with anybody they wanted to. The women, the children, and the men.
You ought to see 3 months tied down with these white men. There ain't no women there for the most part. When they start bringing women, they weren't even bringing women. They were bringing girls between the ages of 6 and 15 and raping them all. But they also were raping the men. Same things was happening on the plantation to demasculinize the black man.
Control the slave population is to rape a father in front of his sons, or to take the biggest, baddest black man on the plantation and do something horrible to him to completely humiliate and emasculate him so that people won't respect him anymore. And that still happens to this day.
In the Caribbean, they had seasoning plantations, which were plantations used to break the slaves. And one plantation or one place that had a lot of seasoning plantations was Jamaica. And people have to wonder, what were they doing on these seasoning plantations that was worse than what was happening on the regular plantations? Well, one thing that they were doing on these plantations, especially in Jamaica, they were doing a process called buck breaking, where the white supremacist slave owner or the white supremacist overseer would literally rape black men in front of the whole black population in order to break his spirit, in order to break him down as a man, in order to show dominance against him, in order to show the rest of the black population that this is not your leader. I just made your leader submit to me sexually. And this happened a lot in Jamaica. This is why homosexuality is so looked down upon in Jamaican culture today.
And it was a way primarily of cutting down those who would rebel. In other words, it was a matter of power and control and domination. And they would call it buck busting, but it was really butt busting.
Slavery continued until 1865 for about 2 generations, right? So how do you reconcile that? You can no longer bring in Africans, but you still have the business of slavery. So they still needed Africans to do the work down south, especially after the cotton gin was invented. So you had the creation of breeding farms. 2 of the largest slave breeding farms in the United States were on the eastern shore of Maryland and right outside of Richmond, Virginia. They literally bred black people like cattle. They would have a strong black man have sex with a healthy black woman. That woman could be his mother, his sister, his aunt, his cousin. It didn't matter, because the end product was produce a child that I can sell, bodies that I can sell and ship down to Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina. It was a business.
We had breeding farms in the United States that would put one person from one plantation against another. We even had a system where if you were a breeder, male on one plantation, and a female on another plantation, or even on the same plantation, even if you were mother and son, they would mate you. And so I tell a lot of my patients and a lot of my friends, you got to stop using the MF word, because that was a description of what actually happened when the paper bag would go over the head to put one breeder against another when they were related.
Incest. Take the eastern shore of Maryland, for example, right? Most people live within a 50-mile radius of where they were born. A large percentage of the people who lived on the eastern shore of Maryland during this time of these breeding farms migrated to Baltimore. Baltimore, Maryland is the incest capital of the United States of America. And according to statistics by my colleague, Dr. Patricia Newton, who's a psychiatrist in Baltimore, in that area in Baltimore, Sandtown, where you had these recent rebellions, 9 out of 10 black women in the depressed parts of Baltimore, 9 out of 10 black women have been victims of incest. In the same area, 7 out of 10 black men have been victims of incest.
Watch the news channels here in America and see how many mixed race black men and women are forecasting the news in America today. Don't miss it. Don't miss who's on the television screen talking to us. That black-skinned woman or man is peripherally there. This mulatto, who I don't blame for their condition, but if you accept that role in society, then you got to take responsibility for what comes from it.
You saw in the movie Precious, right? Monique won an Oscar for her role in Precious. Incest, she had sexual relationships with her own daughter, right? Her daughter was sexually molested by her father in the movie. When Monique was on the Oprah Winfrey Show talking about that film, she talked about the fact that what helped to prepare for that role was her thinking about how she was sexually molested by her own brother, right? Oprah had Monique's brother on her show and asked him point blank, did you know what you were doing when you sexually molested your own sister? And he said, well, I was sexually molested by my uncle ever since I was a little boy. I thought this was natural. Everybody did it. So we look at the socialization of deviant behavior that was set in motion over 100 years ago that is still playing itself out in our communities right now. So until we can understand our history, until we can understand the pain that we're still going through, the mental anguish that we're still going through, and begin to realize how that shapes our thinking, our speech, and our actions today, we'll never be able to heal ourselves or effectively deal with the problems that we still have in our communities.
Because there was once, back in the days of apartheid, a professor came forth and stated, we cannot love you African man, because to love you would mean that we would die.
Because we gave him the keys to the castle. We said, what's making these people so powerful? He said, family. I destroyed the family, I destroyed the empire. So they sold your mother one way and your father another way. They destroyed the family. That's what destroyed Africa. So we had to build family. A black man and a black woman in love, raising a healthy child is the most dangerous thing on this planet. We're looking for a gun. The gun is the relationship.